First and foremost, congratulations Max Verstappen. He thoroughly deserves this year's championship. Barely put a foot wrong all year, phenomenal consistency. Brazil was the dagger, but Vegas was the celebration. And what a place to do it too. F1 should really consider having this as the final race of the season because that was actually a great race. We're going to talk more about Max in a bit, but first off, I got to talk about this Ferrari drama. So, where shall we begin? Let's actually start with Friday, because apparently there was an aura of the devil's lettuce in the air, and you could see that it was having an effect on Charles. He looked like he was up in the atmosphere. During qualifying, Carlos pulls out an amazing lap in Q3 to put the SF24 on the second row. Charles didn't really get his lap together, but still ended up in a decent P4. And knowing Leclerc's track record starting in that position, I was getting pretty geeked, I can't lie. Especially because on Friday, these guys had some serious race pace. The lights go out and he's already in second. In the opening few laps, he tries to pull a move on George, but can't quite get past. And at that point, the tyres just fell off a cliff. Carlos got past him and so did Max. In fact, that first stint for Ferrari was so terrible, I thought they were going to have to do a 3-stop. Anyway, they come in very early, but obviously into quite a bit of traffic. Then at some point, Charles is quicker and Carlos is asked to move aside. To which the Spaniard complies. So far so good, right? Well, up until that point, yes. But after that, Ferrari decided to go back to factory settings. Carlos is literally shouting on the radio that he wants to make his second stop a little bit earlier than normal since the car was just struggling with so much deg. The team refuse and tell him to continue, until he actually just can't take it anymore and is called in, only for Ferrari to hit him with the gotcha and tell him to stay out at the very last second. And I hope you guys are paying attention because this sounded oddly familiar. The Monaco 2022 flashbacks were so strong, I had to double check we were really in big 2024 still making the same old mistakes. Also, how Carlos didn't get a penalty for this, nor was it even investigated, is another certified FIA moment. Apparently, the team weren't ready for him because they were too busy gambling at the casino. As soon as they got done though, they decided to fulfill his request and change his tyres. And at this stage, he's obviously becoming more of a threat to undercut Leclerc. So now, Ferrari decide to leave Charles out for 3 whole laps, leaving absolutely no margin for error. And then, just listen to how this plays out over team radio.
Carlos has been told to not overtake, but it's really close. He might be just in front. He has been told to not put you under pressure. So just take care of your tyres.
Maybe try in Spanish.
Yeah. Fairs. Bro actually said no more Mr. Nice Guy. I'm genuinely here for this guy's villain era, by the way, because he's had to deal with this BS for way too long. He completely crashed out over the radio, and understandably so, to the point where even Fred had to intervene.
Charles, you did your job. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I did my job, but being over all the fucking time. It's not even being nice, it's just being respectful. I know I need to shut up, but at one point it's always the same, so...
And pick up, please.
Yeah, fucking pick up. And the radio is on, I'm sorry.
Nah, don't apologize, bro, speak your truth. He had every right to be pissed. Usually in these situations where Carlos is ahead, he's begging the team to ask Charles to stop racing him and quote, play the team game. But then when he's the one behind, he never respects that. To be fair to Carlos, he is leaving at the end of the day, and so whatever he does has no bearing on his future with the team. In a couple races, he'll be gone, so he wants to score as many podiums while he still can, because once he gets into the Williams, it's over. Speaking of Williams, they had another very expensive weekend. Albon had to retire, Colapinto had a heavy crash at the end of Q2, luckily he was fit enough to race but didn't make much progress. I genuinely feel sorry for these mechanics, man. They do not get paid enough to be constantly fixing all that. And there is absolutely zero way they haven't exceeded the budget cap this year, man. But to be fair, Franco, Alex and Logan are just doing what James Vowles instructed.
23 and 24, I don't care about. We can finish last. Break everything.
Franco came home P14 in the end, just behind Joe. At some point, I really thought this man was going to score points, but I was just gaslighting myself. His teammate had a tough race coming home in last, but let's cancel out the L with a few W's. You might have noticed this guy rocking some hoodies which said, "What's next?" If you didn't already know, Valtteri is no longer going to be on the grid next year since Sauber signed Bortoleto. However, what's great about him selling this merch is that he's giving the money to a charity for people who were unexpectedly fired from their jobs. And on top of that, over the 3-week break between Brazil and Vegas, this man randomly woke up one day and decided to do an entire Ironman in his yard. 3.8k swim, 180k bike ride, and casually just runs a marathon after that. How this man doesn't have a seat, and yet Checo does, I will never understand. This dude has underperformed so badly that they're almost guaranteed to finish third in the Constructors when they really should be second at the very least. If they had 2 competent drivers instead of just 1, they'd actually be ahead of McLaren, to be very honest, since that team fumbled 24/7. But no, none of the employees will get a bonus because one guy can't perform. And it's always the same excuses every week. Gets eliminated in Q1 or Q2 and then says there was just no grip. Has beef with some midfield drivers in the race and then gets praised for a P10 comeback. Without Max, this team would actually be cooked. After Brazil, I don't think I've seen this guy so relaxed around the paddock. He was pretty much chilling going into the weekend after going from 17th to 1st. That race pretty much sealed the deal. Vegas was just a bring the car home kind of drive. Ferrari and Mercedes were quicker than them, so he decided not to take any risks and did what needed to be done. Over the course of this season, it's really been that consistency that has enabled him to win this championship. Obviously, he had a dominant car to begin with that enabled him to build a buffer, but that buffer wasn't something impossible to overturn. When the Red Bull and McLaren were similarly matched between Imola and Silverstone, that's where Verstappen really put in a shift. And after the summer break, there's been a few races like Austin and Monza where he had the 3rd or 4th fastest car, but still managed to maximize results. Even if he couldn't win, he did everything in his power to outscore his main competition or significantly reduce the damage done. That's how the championship was won. Combine that with Lando and McLaren's inability to recognize opportunities and make the most of them, this was just easy pickings for a driver of Verstappen's caliber. There's so much more I want to discuss on this topic, so be sure to look out for a video in the next few days. In short though, Red Bull on average had the 2nd fastest car this year, but Max has been nearly flawless. To me, this is his best championship to date. Made very few mistakes and was always there in important moments. Essentially, it was a brilliant defense of the cushion he built for himself early on in the season, a bit like 2009. Next season though, things could be very different. I doubt the Red Bull will be as dominant at the start of the year, meaning the championship will be much closer, especially with the pace the McLaren has shown for most of this year, and Ferrari just recently showing good form. But there is no doubt in my mind that if they give him a competitive car, you can never count out Max Verstappen. Who his future teammate is going to be has been an endless topic for absolutely ages now. On one hand, I think Red Bull are probably just going to keep Checo for the cash, but at the same time, Yuki-san, he's been applying that pressure, don't get it twisted. My guy had a phenomenal weekend, and when asked to give a comment on Max winning the title, this is what he said.
Well done. But at the same time, there's activities like you mentioned in Red Bull, there's like I call it unserious race 3s, and when we compete each other, I always win, so,
Hey, talk to him, bro. Let him know what's up. Coming into the weekend as well, he also said, I'm gonna keep destroying my teammates until Red Bull promote me. And I'm wondering, when did bro suddenly choose violence and come out with the coldest quotes known to man? It's honestly crazy how these guys are just ignoring him when he's done everything and more to deserve that seat. But at the same time, I don't want him to get hit with the curse that is the 2nd seed at that team. So maybe another top team will take notice and give him a shot. It's also crazy how dude was almost denied entry into the country. He turned up at the airport and border control said, and I quote, he doesn't look like an F1 driver. Nah, what do you mean by that? I ain't gonna say too much else though, so let's just move on. Lawson had a new beef of the week. This time it was K-Mac, and Checo managed to have one small little moment with this double overtake on the pair of them. Lawson didn't have a great race, but considering this was just his first time in Vegas, I can let it slide. After a double podium at Interlagos, the Alpines got snapped back into reality. Gasly actually pulled off one of the best laps of all time. I don't care what anybody says. How he managed to put that car in P3, I'll never understand. And because he typically doesn't get a lot of media attention, a lot of his superb driving has gone under the radar this year. Unfortunately though, the high was short-lived, as he was forced to retire with a power unit problem. Ocon finished 2nd last after his team weren't ready for him on one of the pit stops. Like, look at this man, one mechanic. Ain't no tires being changed over there. These lot were just playing poker with the Ferrari mechanics. Ocon basically just does a drive through the pit lane and has to go back around the track to actually make his stop. And while we're talking about incompetence, let's discuss Aston Martin. Alonso spent his Sunday battling superior cars again with a green bus, but narrowly finished outside the points in P11. Meanwhile, Stroll's radio just wasn't working, so he quite literally didn't know when the team were gonna pit him. In the end, he came home in 15th. Haas scored with Hülkenberg, who was exceptional again, and Magnussen just missed out in 12th. Mercedes, for absolutely no reason whatsoever, just decided to lock in. The cold track conditions really turned their car from a midfielder into unbeatable. George was absolutely perfect, took pole position, defended the lead supremely well in the early laps, and controlled the race beautifully to take his 2nd win of the season. Meaning 2024 has seen 7 different drivers all win multiple races, which is the first time in F1 history. Although there was a point in the race I thought Russell would get a bit shaky because Lewis's race pace was from another universe. If he qualified like a normal human being, it would have been the easiest Grand Slam of his life. But nonetheless, the recovery drive was mightily impressive. So much for that shelf life, Toto. McLaren were nowhere all weekend. They struggled a lot more with the colder conditions compared to the Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari. Norris did everything he could, but it wasn't enough. And Piastri also struggled quite a lot. I think the very unique track temperatures meant that the McLaren was just constantly out of the optimal window. They probably had a lot of pace, but they just couldn't unlock it because of how cold it was. But in Qatar, I expect them to be back at the front with Ferrari. Now that the championship is over, these next few races should be hella exciting. I could see Norris was visibly relieved in the post-race interviews that journalists are no longer asking him about him versus Max, which, to be honest, was never really a rivalry in the first place. F1 were just trying to gas it up for the fans, but ain't nobody was buying it. The performance among the top 4 teams has never been so unpredictable, so I'm genuinely curious to see what happens for the remainder of the season. If I were to make some predictions, I honestly don't think Mercedes will win again this year. The next 2 countries F1 is headed to are far too hot. And remember how their seats were getting hot in Singapore? Their asses might actually get burned to the bone in Qatar. Pause. Ferrari and McLaren are my picks to be fastest. Max will also have nothing to lose, so it should be fun seeing him going all out. Whenever championships are wrapped up earlier, it's obviously not fun because you'd want to see it go down to the wire, but at the same time, when there's nothing to play for, it can create some of the most exciting races. For example, Brazil 2019. And with the field closer than ever, yeah, this is set to be absolute cinema. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, be sure to drop a like, share this around with friends, and subscribe to the channel if you're new to get my latest videos in the future. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.